that those behavioral interventions are trying to address. And it's usually related to mindless eating. And I'm going to focus on two types of nudges, the nudges that are designed to increase awareness of food quantity, and what I'm going to call the Epicurean nudges. So first, many reasons why people overeat. I'm not going to talk about eating disorders, I'm not going to talk about trauma, but more about the 200 casual food decisions that people make every day, right? And what we observe most of the time is mindless eating. Distraction has a strong impact on how much people eat. Eating in front of TV increases eating, or what we call the portion size effect. The fact that how much people eat is largely driven by how much food there is on their plate, or how large the pack of chips they have, right? And eventually, how much people eat is not really driven by internal signals of satiety or hunger, but it's driven simply by availability, right? So there's probably one of the most famous food behavioral study is called the self-refilling bowl. I'm going to show you a bunch of studies like that are quite informative. So in this study, the participants were assigned to different groups. There was one, and they were all invited to eat tomato soup. In one of the group, they were given regular tomato soup bowls, and in the other group, they had self-refilling bowls. So there was a mechanism, like on the cartoon, that could refill the bowl of soup. And people were not aware, the participants were not aware of this mechanism that would refill the bowl of soup. So simply doing that increased consumption by close to 73%. And most importantly, those participants were not aware of how much they had eaten. So this really shows that satiety and eating consumption is really driven by the availability and not by feedback, and not so much by bodily feedback, such as fullness or satiety. And the other issue is the problem of emotions. I guess we all know how much emotions impact food, the type of food that we eat and how much food we eat, in particular negative emotions like boredom or sadness or anxiety. So this is one of the earlier studies that I've done with Pierre Chandon, who was my PhD advisor some time ago. And we had 700 participants that were all fans of football. And we observed what they would eat after the victory or the defeat of their favorite team. And what we noticed that we observed like all Sunday games during several seasons of the NFL championship. And the day after a defeat, we observed an increase in 16% of fatty foods, but also quantity of food in grams and calories after that defeat, showing the strong impact of emotions. So many drivers of overconsumption, but the key question now is what we can do about that. What are the solutions? So one key solution that I've worked on a bit is eating mindfulness, and I suppose, and we can have this discussion afterwards, that some of you might use mindfulness training as part of their practice, like developing that moment-to-moment, non-judgmental awareness cultivated by paying attention. And a lot of research suggests that this type of training, this type of practice can have a true impact on addressing impulsive or emotional eating, at controlling portions, and also reducing food waste, because it's also one of the consequences of reducing food consumption. The key issue here is that it does not really qualify as a nudge, as a behavioral intervention, because it needs to be developed over time through training, and it cannot really apply to those 200 food decisions that we make every day. So the idea here is to develop simple behavioral interventions or nudges. And as I told you, I'm going to focus on those that are designed to increase awareness of quantity, and those that are related to focusing on sensory enjoyment. So I'm going to first start with the quantity awareness nudges. And I'm going to talk a little bit about marketing here. So one key issue that we are confronted with is the increase in available portion sizes at restaurants, but also at home. So if you go to McDonald's, you can order Coke up to 50 centiliters. If you go to 7-Eleven, you can order Coke or any carbonated drink up to 2 liters, right? So this is like absolutely huge portion sizes. And it's something that is fairly recent, right? It's really over the past 30, 40 years that portion sizes have become so huge, so humongous. And there's a lot of research that suggests a direct causality of the availability of large portion sizes on the obesity crisis. And as a matter of fact, I remember as a child in the early 90s, when we went to a cafe and my parents would order a Coke, she would receive that bottle, that 19 centiliter bottle. And it was the only available portion size, right? And today, the child size at McDonald's, the 25 centiliter, is larger than the unique adult portion size that was available 40 years ago. So it's really a massive problem here. And it's related to mindless eating because of this portion size effect, right? The larger the portion size, the more we eat. And also because, as I will show, we really underestimate larger portion sizes. It's an exercise that I do all the time with my students. I tell them, okay, this super big gulp is 120 centiliters. Can you estimate the quantity, the volume of a double gulp? And on average, they say 150 centiliters. They completely underestimate that it's actually almost 2 liters. And as I mentioned, satiety is really driven by how much we perceive we have eaten, and not so much by how much we have eaten. So different nudges here. I'm going to start with one that I quite like, the segmentation cues. So since mindless eating is driven by this unawareness of quantity, like there can be simple solutions. It could be in the product design, but also what people prepare for themselves that can increase that awareness. So there's a really cool study in which the researchers introduced a red potato chip every 10 potato chips. And just doing that, just introducing this very simple segmentation cues, decreased consumption by 50%, right? And also improved the accuracy at people's estimation of how much they have eaten. It just provides a meter to people so that such that they don't eat large quantities mindlessly. Another solution that can be even easier to apply at home is resealable packs, right? One issue when we have this big pack of chips is that we tend to eat it mindlessly entirely in front of TV. And a very simple study here in which the participants were given either a resealable pack of candies or a non-resealable pack of candies had a massive issue on how much these movie goers would eat by the end of the movie. From 60 grams in the regular pack to, from 150 grams for the regular pack to 60 grams, so almost divided by 3, just when the people had the opportunity to seal their pack of candies. And why does it work? First, consumers tend to be really worried about the perishability of food, and that can drive overconsumption. So this can address that concern. And also, there's also a more psychological mechanism. When you close the package, right, it creates that impression of closure. Okay, I have done eating my portion size. I can move on to something else. Another important thing to consider is this estimation of very large portion sizes that I mentioned before. The fact that we are very poorly equipped physically to evaluate the size of very large portions. But there can be solutions that marketers can implement actually, and that people should also be aware in order to understand the impact that marketing and package design have on them. It's the design of the portion sizes. So this is a very simple study in which, again, the participants were divided into 2 groups. One group in which they had to evaluate the volumes of these different packs of M&Ms, and the other group had to evaluate the packs on the upper picture here. So the volumes were actually exactly the same, but what changed across the conditions is the dimensionality. So in the upper picture, the packages increase in one dimension only, so only the height increases, and in the lower picture, the volumes increase in 3 dimensions. And the participants were asked to evaluate what was the volume in all subsequent portion sizes. And as you can see, when the volume increases in 3 dimensions, people are very, very bad at evaluating how large portion sizes are. And they get slightly better, but definitely still underestimating, but slightly better when the volume increases in only 1 dimension. So it really shows, like, first, this kind of interesting effect about the impact of geometry on how much we estimate portion sizes. But it also shows the importance of those visual cues, this awareness of the quantities that can be facilitated by specific package design or product design, right? And the other thing that I think people should be aware of to understand the impact that marketing has on them is portion sizes, the size labels, right? So for instance, the medium size at McDonald's is 117 grams, and it's the same size as the small size at Burger King. So you have really a large heterogeneity in how manufacturers, restaurants, marketers label their portion sizes, which can have, as you will see, a strong normative influence. Just, do you know what's the size of the regular portions at Five Guys? Can you make a guess? 200? 300? It's actually 400 grams. And that's called regular. That's called regular portion size. As if, like, for one person, this was supposed to be normal. And that's a problem, right? Those labels have a strong normative influence on people. They think that it's normal. They think that it's okay to eat a normal portion size of fries at Five Guys. And this is a study that we've done a few years ago, in which indeed we divided the participants into 3 different groups, and we asked them to choose a portion size of fries, which were always the same quantity indicated in the packaging, but we just changed the label. We called them either regular Big King, or small regular big, or mini small regular. And if you make normal, if you normalize. If you normalize 150 grams of fries, it will have an impact on the amount of people decide to eat, right? Those portion sizes really have a strong influence. So I'm going to stop with all those nudges, all those explanations related to portion size and quantity. And I'm going to move on to something else that my advisor Pierre and I have been working a lot on, and it's the idea of Epicurean eating. So something that we've noticed via diverse survey, in particular in North America, is this idea, this perception of food as fuel for the body, right? Food is something that will activate the machinery, right? It's a bunch of calories and nutrients to make us keep going. And when people purchase food, they're trying to maximize quantity. They're trying to get bang for the buck. So that's what we call the energy model of food consumption. And we propose that there is an alternative model, an Epicurean model, and we call it Epicurean because it just dates back from ancient Greek philosophy. And Epicurus already said at the time, a wise person does not simply choose the largest amount of food, but the most pleasing food, which is interesting because it already suggests that seeking pleasure or sensory pleasure can help portion control. It's kind of implied in this quote. So this focus on the aesthetic and this sensory qualities of food could have potentially positive effects on people's eating decisions. So how does it work? How can we explain this kind of counterintuitive effect? So when people choose portion sizes, so decide for the small or the large portion of fries, or the small cupcake, or the large piece of cake, they're usually driven by how much they expect the food to fill them up, to satisfy their hunger, and also for value for money. Am I getting enough bang for the buck? But what we suggest is that sensory pleasure works differently. Right? Sensory pleasure seems to peak with smaller portion sizes and decrease with larger portion sizes. And something, I think with this audience, we're all familiar with this term, the idea of sensory-specific satiety. Right? The idea that sensory pleasure peaks with the first few mouthfuls, and then each additional mouthful of food will decrease sensory pleasure. And eventually the amount of pleasure we remember from a food portion is highly driven by the very last bite that we had. So if that very last bite that we had was not so pleasing because the portion size was really big, then it can actually spoil the entire experience, at least in terms of retrospective evaluation, in terms of remembered evaluation. And it's something that we observe physiologically in everyone, in adults, in kids, in animals, but people also have the intuition of it, right? So this is a very simple study that we did, and we showed to the participants 6 portion sizes of chocolate cake of growing sizes, and we first asked them to evaluate the portion sizes based on whether it would be just enough to satisfy hunger. And if the criterion is hunger, we see that the optimal portion size is 4. And then we asked them to evaluate the same portion sizes based on whether they would be just enough to provide sensory pleasure. And here, like, people do have this intuition that their sensory pleasure will be maximized with smaller portions, and that the more you increase portion sizes, the more it's going to spoil, to affect negatively this sensory pleasure. So it exists in reality as a physiological effect. It exists in people's intuition. Now, how can we leverage it? How can we design an intervention that will make people choose rightfully, choose based on their expectations of sensory pleasure, rather than what will fill them up or what will be good value for money? So the first before I get to the intervention, I also want to show you this correlational evidence. We developed a scale of Epicurean pleasure seeking, so asking participants to answer or to evaluate whether they agree with different items, such as if I try, I can clearly and easily imagine the taste of many dishes. I value the look, the smell, the taste, the texture in mouth of foods. My friends say that I'm a foodie. Cooking is a major form of art. There's a lot of beauty in food. And what we find in very different food cultures, in the US, in France, in Canada, English-speaking Canada and Quebec, we do find this positive correlation between this Epicurean eating pleasure tendency, so this tendency to seek pleasure from the sensory and symbolic dimensions of food, and the preference for smaller portion sizes. So being an Epicurean can help portion control. So what could be interventions? So the first type of intervention we tried is this idea of sensory imagery. It's definitely inspired by mindfulness, although we developed it to be quite short, like a couple of minutes. And it just consists in exposing people to pictures of delicious foods, chocolate, strawberry pie, vanilla ice cream, chocolate mousse. And we asked people to vividly imagine the taste, the texture in mouth, the scent of those pleasurable foods. And you will see that it can have an impact on portion control. So one of the studies that we did is that we assigned the participants to different groups. So this sensory imagery condition that I just described, there was a control condition, so completely unrelated to food. We just asked people to imagine sitting on armchairs. And a health imagery condition. So this is just making people freak out about health. It's just showing them the same pictures of foods and asking people to imagine the negative impact it would have on their health or on their weight. And after that, so 3 conditions: imagining the sensory pleasure of food, imagining the armchairs, or imagining the negative effect on health and weight. And then we asked the participants to evaluate to choose a portion size of brownie. So you have here 5 portions of brownie. So we measured portion choice, we measured expected enjoyment, we also measured actual enjoyment in some of the participants. So first I'm going to show you how am I doing on time? And that
20 minutes.
Oh, that's great. I have plenty of time. I can slow it down. So first, we're going to look at the impact on expected enjoyment. So first you have, in the control condition, what kind of enjoyment people expect to have. So they expect enjoyment to increase up to the 3rd portion, and then it would be just too large, and people expect it to decrease their enjoyment. Now in the health imagery condition, where people are asked to worry about the negative impact of foods on their health and weight. So we see that there's a shift in preference for a smaller portion. We also see a decrease, an overall decrease in expected enjoyment. So worrying about health and weight can have this negative impact on expected pleasure. And now you have the sensory imagery condition. So that's the most interesting one, because we see that it doesn't affect so much overall expectations of pleasure, except for the smallest portion. It increases the expected enjoyment, but only for the smallest portions. And this is something that seems to be verified in the portion choice, right? We see that both in the health imagery and the sensory imagery conditions, participants tend to choose smaller portion sizes, but they do so for different reasons. And we can have an intuition of the reason why people are better at portion control by comparing the portion choice with a portion that is expected to maximize the expected enjoyment. So basically, you choose a portion and then you evaluate which portion you think should be better, which is not necessarily the same one. So in the control condition, participants expect portion 3.1 on average, and we average that across the participants. So expect portion 3.1 to be the most enjoyable, yet they choose portion 2.9. So they restrain themselves a little bit. In the health imagery condition, here the effect is even stronger. They expect portion 2.6 to be the most enjoyable, and yet they restrain themselves a lot by choosing portion 1.9. And this is what we call a hedonic cost. People impose themselves a hedonic cost, a sacrifice of their own expectations of pleasure out of worrying for their health or for their weight. And finally, in the sensory imagery condition, we see this perfect alignment between the portion expected to maximize pleasure and the chosen portion. So what it suggests here is that focusing on the sensory pleasure, it makes people choose a smaller portion, not despite of pleasure, not out of sacrificing pleasure, but because of pleasure, because they expect those smaller portions to be more enjoyable, right? And this is just to confirm that in reality it is true that larger portion sizes can be less enjoyable, right? So here we're looking at the actual enjoyment. The interventions did not have much effect, but what we see overall is that indeed the smaller portions are more enjoyable. So by focusing on sensory pleasure, people choose the smaller portions that will actually deliver the highest amount of pleasure. Right? So this is with adults. I know some of you are very interested in childhood nutrition, and we had this great opportunity to collaborate with a team of childhood nutritionists in France, and we could recruit 171 kids in schools, in elementary schools in France. And we did exactly the same intervention. We divided them into 2 groups. One group focusing on sensory pleasure, condition 1, and the other group in the control condition, focusing on other experiences than food. And then all the kids had the opportunity to choose portion sizes of brownies and applesauce, 0 sugar applesauce. And what was interesting is that the intervention had an impact in reducing portion choice of the brownie, but it left the healthy food largely unaffected. So it seems to have this positive effect, thank you, this positive effect on reducing portion sizes among kids for those high-fat, high-calorie foods, but it leaves the healthy food largely unaffected. So this is the first type of intervention, the sensory imagery. This 3 to 5 minute mindful practice of sensory imagery can promote portion control, and it can also increase the expected enjoyment of those smaller portions. Unfortunately, the practical applications for adults are a little bit limited, but at least among kids, it can be integrated in classroom activities. It's something that is done a lot. Sensory education in kindergarten, in elementary schools. I know it's done a lot in Europe, not so much in North America, but as part of a curriculum, as part of the education for kids, learning about the different flavors, trying to overcome food neophobia, which can be quite an issue with kids, discovering different flavors, having that type of positive attitude toward foods as opposed to freaking out about the negative impact it can have on health. It could have those types of consequences. The second type of intervention I want to develop is the idea of Epicurean labeling. And here we are much closer to this idea of nudge, of these simple, brief behavioral interventions. It's the idea of using language that emphasizes the aesthetic and the sensory properties of foods, and it could be implemented in marketing on the menus of restaurants, also on food packages. So here's a study that we've done. It was also in France, but we have some other studies in Canada and in North America. We could collaborate with a research restaurant, and we could recruit 107 paying customers, so real customers who are paying for their meals. And we developed this all-you-can-eat menu. For a fixed price, the participants or the clients could order as many portions they wanted of a starter, so that was a gnocchi salad, salade de quenelle, of a main dish. These were mini shepherd pies, parmentier de bœuf, and a dessert, the lemon tartlets. So everyone had access to exactly the same food for the same price, but what we varied across conditions was the design of the menu. The design of the menu was different across the participants. So first there was a control menu in which we just provided some very simple explanation of what the food was. Then there was the nutrition menu. So this was designed a little bit to replicate the other study that I showed earlier, in which we asked people to worry about health and weight. And here we just provided a lot of information about the amount of calories and the percentage of nutrition. That's what we call the Epicurean menu. We provided these rich, vivid, multi-sensory descriptions of the food that we developed with the chef. And we also had a small text explaining how food tastes better when using all the senses, when smelling the food, appreciating the texture. So trying to put people in that kind of mindful Epicurean mindset. And so we measured a bunch of things. We measured calorie intake, and we see that both the nutrition labeling and the Epicurean labeling succeeded at reducing calorie intake compared to the control menu. We also measured pleasure expectations. So here, only the Epicurean menu increased pleasure expectations. So it validates, it triangulates the earlier findings that people choose smaller portion sizes out of higher pleasure expectations for those smaller portion sizes. A metric that is of course important for restaurant managers is the willingness to pay, or the evaluation of what would be a good price for the meal. And what's interesting is that in the Epicurean condition, despite having chosen a smaller portion size, the participants were willing to pay a higher price for it. And Oh yeah, and we also measured eating pace. So there were cameras in the research restaurant. It was quite interesting, and we asked a very brave research assistant to measure how much time people spent eating each food bite. And there were a bunch of participants from the time they had a food bite on their fork to the time they had visibly finished swallowing the food. We were very precise in order to measure their pace of eating. And it seemed that people, at least in the Epicurean condition, also the nutrition condition, were also eating at a slower rate, which is one of the indicators that people are eating more mindfully, right? So Epicurean menus, they reduce calorie consumption, increase pleasure expectations and value. They increase savoring, and it doesn't leave people more hungry, right? So it's something else that we measured at some point. So the key takeaways here, so there can be simple methods to help people eat more mindfully, and also reduce portion sizes, also avoid food waste, and it really relies on leveraging those tricks, those behavioral, those cognitive nudges that can help limit consumption. So the first one is based on this idea that satiety is largely influenced by perception and by a good monitoring of quantities. So using segmentation cues in the food in order to increase the awareness of quantity, using resealable packs, better noticing the portion sizes with increases in one dimension rather than 3 dimensions, and also label portion size appropriately. Like, I don't know, 50 grams of fries should be the normal portion size, not 400 grams of fries. Maybe 50 grams is not enough, maybe a bit more. and this idea of Epicurean eaters, right? This focus on sensory enjoyment, suggesting that pleasure is not the enemy of healthy eating, it can be the ally of healthy eating, and that can also increase this awareness of satiety, of sensory-specific satiety in particular. So a brief practice of sensory imagery, also working with the kids on developing their taste, their palate, fighting neophobia, discovering different flavors, appreciating the beauty of food, can be, I believe, quite effective. And also in the design of packaging, in the design of restaurant menus, this focus on the multi-sensory pleasure can be quite effective. Not as effective as calorie labeling, but if it can encourage people to reduce quantities without affecting their pleasure of eating, I think it can be something that could be quite beneficial for everyone, for consumers, for health, and also for business. All right, I'm going to stop here. You have here my email address. I have my website as well, in which you can download a lot of the research that I showed. Please don't hesitate to contact me. Always happy to interact, to discuss about research, potentially research projects. Thank you very much.
Anyone has questions?
I have a question. That was excellent, Yann. Thank you so much. I learned a ton. I was taking notes on my phone. I was just wondering, why do people, some of my clients say, like, they just love to sit down to a big bowl of ice cream, like that's their comfort, that's their moment of joy, when in fact the science is showing that a smaller portion would satisfy their pleasure needs more?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do buy it. I do believe that there is something truly comforting in overeating, especially in front of TV. And just that large quantity of ice cream will go all along the shows, right? And you can associate the pleasure of watching your favorite TV show with every mouthful of a vanilla ice cream. But I believe it would be only the case if you kind of become unaware of what you're eating, if you develop that form of mindless eating. As soon as you're starting paying more attention, focusing more on the food, you turn off the TV, you sit, maybe you're with your friends and discuss the flavor of the ice cream, then I don't think that a larger quantity would be as comforting. So that would be the moderator here. If there is higher awareness, higher focus on the food, I don't think that larger quantities would be as satisfying.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes?
I also wanted to speak on that as well. There could be other factors of wanting to feel really full, or if there's some sort of background restriction. I feel like that could influence it as well.
That's a good point. So a lot of some of the studies that I showed, we did find a mitigation effects. So we find those effects among what we call normal eaters, so unrestrained eaters. But as soon as we get into the restrained eaters, the chronic dieters, people who have had might have trauma with food or might have some eating disorders, you're not going to have those effects anymore. It can actually almost backlash, have a backlash effect, like increasing the salience of the food, increasing the accessibility of the thoughts of the food. Can somehow have a negative consequence among people who have developed eating disorders somehow. So this is really the psychology of normal eaters, unrestrained eaters. Yes?
I have a question regarding social eating then, because I'm not sure if people, when they're really into lifestyles and they have their wine and they're socially entertaining, wouldn't they eat more and not?
Yeah, that's definitely true. Lots of research shows that social eating increases consumption. So there's different reasons to that. The first one is unawareness, of course, like when you're in a social situation and you're discussing, you're not aware of how much you're eating. There can also be a social influence, right? We see somebody else eating more, so we think, oh, it's okay to eat more, right? There can be this normative effect that can be at play. At the same time, and we're not always or rarely in this situation where food is the focus of the conversation. We talk about the food during a couple of minutes and then we move on to something else. So very quickly that focus, that awareness tends to disappear in a social situation when we're eating with friends or family. That's true.
And then if no one phrase this, the mindful eating part, what it, in the ideal world, you're sitting by yourself and you're being mindful and eating. Otherwise what? What's the solution?
Yeah, that's exactly the issue. So I really buy all the research that is done on eating mindfulness, and I think eating mindfulness training is one of the greatest contributions of food science. There's a lot of research that suggests that it has worked among overweight, obese people in losing weight. It has worked in helping people develop healthier, by healthier, I mean more positive relation with foods, accepting foods as part of their life, as opposed to being afraid of food. So it definitely has a lot of positive consequences, but the huge issue is how hard it is to apply to everyday decisions. Among people that are not particularly motivated to develop that mindful mindset. So this is what I'm trying to develop. If people are not motivated to be mindful all the time, can there be passively, indirectly influenced to be mindful, right? Can we find those nudges, those tricks to put them situationally in these mindful situations without having them go through really complex training? Yeah?
Do you have any tips for if you're eating and you're really busy? You know what I mean? It's you're trying to be sweet and you just don't have time to sit down and think about the food and everything. You're also really hungry, so you want to eat food.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as we get busier and busier, and we are sedentary, and we work in front of the computer, this form of distracted eating can be a huge issue, and I'm definitely a victim of that. Eating my sandwich in front of my computer, but it just requires a weird discipline to stop what we are doing, whether it's being in front of a computer or watching TV, and just to allocate some time. Okay, now I'm going to eat. And I will try to appreciate the food by refocusing my attention. It requires quite a discipline, especially when time is scarce. Yeah. Yeah?
have there been any research studies looking at using some of these marketing techniques or nudges on some of the healthier foods? Like, for example, I know that there's like that bottomless bowl, like, have there studies been on like bottomless bowls of salads? And you can just see these nudging things being very effective in like food service operations and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of research on how to encourage the consumption of healthy foods, and the most convincing research is about salience, right? Whether it is in company restaurants, in cafeterias, so when there is this buffet of food, just making sure that the healthy food is the most accessible, the most visible, and the less healthy food is harder to reach, a bit more out of sight. So just this salience can surprisingly have some strong effect on what people choose. And also the way, there's like a lot of research on smart kitchen, right? Develop the design of your kitchen as a way to make the healthier foods the most accessible. So the jar of cookies should not be on the counter, it should be in the cupboard, but the oranges and the apples should be on the counter. Like this, like it has to be visible, easy to reach, and just people are lazy, right? They will grab what's the most immediate there, and it's also the top of mind food if it's just directly visible, as opposed to in the cupboard or hidden behind something else, right? So salience for sure. When something that I wish I could have talked about it, I didn't include it in the presentation for healthy foods, is and probably a problematic impact of marketing is all the health labeling, right? So when something is labeled as low fat, when something is labeled as even organic, for instance, any type of label that suggests that the food is healthy will be overly generalized. Like if you label a food as low fat, people will tend to believe, oh, it's also low in sugar, although it's not necessarily the case. And one consequence of one consequence is binary thinking, right? So something I guess you've all noticed in your practice, that people tend to put foods in the good bin or the bad bin. If it's in the good bin, if I consider the food as healthy, then I think I can eat more of it, which is a big problem. And sometimes it's much better to have the regular hamburger and the regular portion of fries at McDonald's, as opposed to a huge quantity of salad with a lot of mayo and a lot of less healthy ingredients in them, right? Because we somehow consumers know that they need to control their portion size of more indulgent food, but they don't necessarily apply the same discipline when it's about a food that they consider healthier. Right? Lots of things to say about healthy foods.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think there was a lot of insights there. I would invite one of you to share again, maybe one insight that you have learned from this presentation. There's a saying in that we only learn when we reflect on the content. So is there anyone or two of you who would like to share one key insight you learned from this presentation that might be helpful for your practice or for your clients?
I think it presents us with a real opportunity in how we speak about the foods we're trying to encourage our clients to consume. Because I think it's natural for us to speak to the nutritional benefits and talk to them about it from a nutritional stance, but we don't often talk about the pleasurable aspects, and I think it's really easy for clients to put healthy foods, non-pleasurable, deprivation on one side, and then all the foods that I love, quote unquote, unhealthy on the other. And I find that using messages of pleasure and also giving people permission to experience pleasure, because I think people actually like fruits and vegetables and quote unquote healthy food less because they associate them with, oh, I eat these when I'm being healthy, as opposed to like, I just made this like really killer salad that was like as good as any French fries I could eat.
Absolutely. I think that there's so much insight in that, and yes, it's true. We focus on nutrition as dietitian, But yes, I think one of the messages is teaching kids the sensory properties, and I think there's so much value and power in that. Helen, you want to share?
I was interested about the sensory aspects of food. Are you from France?
Yeah.
Okay, because in BC they have a new resource called Teach Food First, and it's about food exploration with kids and teaching kids about the joys of trying new foods and the sensory aspects. So I thought, well, it's executed for science line, all that, all the parents do that, but I think it's a paradigm shift in teaching kids about food and nutrition. Like we don't talk about the health effects or how nutritious the food is, but it's about how like the colors and the tastes and the flavors, and it's a much more positive approach.
And also, kids don't care so much about nutrition. So.
That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Last one? Yes.
Hi, first I just want to say thank you for your presentation. Like, I learned so much from it.
Thank you.
And then what I found most relatable to myself was like the bang for buck. Because like 4 years ago when I first moved here as an international student, like, to me going to grocery was horrible. Everything was so expensive and I didn't dare like to buy anything. I would always want to buy the cheapest thing available. So what happened was that I tend to overeat, and then I ate as much as I could every time I had a chance. And then I gained like 9 kilos in like 2 months. Yeah. So to the point where I am now, I feel like that's very relatable, and like things like
Yeah, another topic is of course the social issues. We've had this discussion. A lot of concerns about social inequality in relation with food. Different, like the food deserts, for instance, the fact that in low-income neighborhoods there's no outlet for healthier food, and the only available outlets are McDonald's and Taco Bell, and it's the only option available for low-income families quite often. And also, like, cheap food tends to be the most unhealthy, and buying produce is extraordinarily expensive for a lot of low-income families. So definitely, so we develop tricks, which is good, but this awareness of this social inequity when it comes to the ability to purchase healthier food, it's just quite a concern as well.
And it'll be interesting to see with food inflation as well.
Yeah.
Like how that will play a role. And I think that ties really nicely into our second presentation from Jennifer from Half Your Plate.
So I am here today to talk about a very exciting topic, fruits and vegetables. I know right now we are dealing with food inflation. We are dealing with, so many issues when it comes to produce and waste. So I'm really hoping to better support you so that you can help your clients make fruits and vegetables the easier choice. So the learning objectives for today, I'd really want to kind of dive in a little deeper and share some of these consumer trends that we're seeing around produce. So looking at consumption, and also looking at consumption when it comes down to how the pandemic and how the war in Ukraine and how price inflation has impacted consumer behavior. We're also going to look at some of the common barriers of fruits and vegetables and some key strategies of how we can better support our clients to overcome these barriers, as well as showcase some of our great Half Your Plate resources that we've developed throughout the year. And I have to admit, a lot of input from you as dietitians has gone into these resources, so thank you for all of your feedback as well. So let's talk about fruit and vegetable consumption in Canada. So what percentage of Canadians do you think are not eating enough fruits and veggies? Any guesses?
60, 70, 80.
90.
Okay, so I hear quite a wide range, or 60, 70, 80, 90. It just kept getting higher and higher, right? No one said 100. So when we actually look at the statistics for consumption, we see it's actually close to 79% or close to 80% of the population is not eating enough fruits and vegetables. How do you feel about that? It's very surprising, eh? It's quite surprising, and I think it kind of shows us that, we need to really make a difference. And when we look at kind of the fruit and vegetable patterns over the years, now this one here, I'll admit, was taken from the 2015 Canadian Community Health Survey data, so it is a little bit, older, but we're hoping that Health Canada will start looking at fruit and vegetable consumption again. It hasn't happened since then, so we're hoping in their kind of new reiteration of the CCHS that this will come out so that we can have this data. But when you look at the patterns of fruits and vegetables, in general, over the past 20 or so years, we started to see kind of in the beginning, in the 2000s, it started to increase a little bit. And then when it hit around 2009, the recession happened, and that's when we started to see fruit and vegetables kind of drop. And in more recent years, it's kind of stayed at around here. So I think there's a lot of work that, you know, we need to do on our end and from other lenses as well. Now, when it comes down to how much are Canadians actually eating, if we look at it from men and women, average daily serving size, I know right now with Canada's food guide, we're kind of going away from the food guide servings and we're focusing on filling half your plate. But when you actually compare it to the recommendations of 7 to 10 servings of fruits and vegetables per day, we're looking, women are consuming on average 3.9 servings, men are consuming 3.4 servings. So really a lot lower than the recommendations. So a lot of work that needs to be done. And not surprisingly, I think we see this in a lot of data, women are eating more vegetables and fruit than men. Another important factor that I wanted to point out, and this one here comes from an annual consumption survey that we do with a research firm, but we also see that produce consumption is strongly related to household income. So you can see over here on the top, you know, it's a little bit small, but you can see that as household income increases, produce consumption increases. And I think that's something that we need to, as dietitians, we need to really just be aware of, especially if we're working with more vulnerable populations. It's really just to be aware that this is something that is a real barrier to this community. Now, what are the top barriers? Well, when we survey Canadians and when we ask them, you know, what are some of the barriers to eating more fruits and vegetables? The number one answer that we get is that produce simply spoils too quickly. And I'm not surprised by that. If you look at all the different foods in the supermarket, fruits and vegetables are very perishable. And I think it requires a lot of food skills, and I think it's something that a lot of Canadians lack when it comes down to how to properly store, how to properly select your produce. Secondly, Canadians consider fruits and vegetables too expensive. And thirdly, they tend to stick with what they like. So these ones here are the top barriers that we see from Canadians. Now, how has produce consumption changed since COVID? I know we're still in COVID, but just what's happened since then? So interestingly enough, overall, we've seen the rate of fruit and vegetable consumption has kind of stayed the same. But for 20% of this population, it has changed. So in 10% of this population, we've seen an increase in fruit and vegetable consumption. And in 10% of the population, we've seen a decrease. So what's happened? Well, for the 10% increase, think about it, you know, when the pandemic happened, we were all at home. People were cooking more. They were forced to make meals. They were forced to do some more grocery shopping. So you definitely saw that people were cooking more. I don't know about you, but I definitely noticed that when the pandemic happened, people were talking about immune-boosting foods. Oh my God, we have to eat fruits and veggies because we need to boost our immune system. I saw so many great blogs from my dietetic community on this topic. But that was another trend that happened as well. And then there was a need to support our local community. So that was another driver for increase in produce consumption. What happened with the 10% that had a decrease in consumption? Well, fruits and vegetables being too expensive. You're starting to see kind of a common theme here. Going bad before using, and then less disposable income with job losses and all that. I'm sure that's not a surprising figure to see. Other consumer trends that I found were very interesting that are worth mentioning is there's been a real, we've seen it, I'm sure you've all experienced it, but there's definitely been a big increase in online grocery shopping. And when you look at the stats here, you'll actually see that, you know, post-COVID, are you still likely to do online shopping? And a big amount of the population is still interested in it. So I think that's interesting, just as nutrition professionals, like when it comes to supporting our clients, a lot of them are doing online grocery shopping. So think about strategies of how you can support them here. It's tough though, because when it comes down to produce, the number one reason people dislike online grocery shopping is because they don't get to select their own produce. And I don't know about you, but when I've done some online grocery shopping, it kind of sucks when you get, something that's not fresh or something that's not ripe and not what you picked. So another thing to consider when you're working with clients. Another important kind of factor that I think is interesting to consider is that we definitely are at a state now where the population is really willing to try new things. They want to try new recipes, they want to try new ingredients. They're more open to learning about more exotic type of produce. So this is kind of a great time to really, really focus on these in your communications. So we all know now that Canadians aren't eating enough fruits and vegetables. Well, why is this such a concern? Well, as dietitians, we know the benefits of fruits and vegetables. They're high in fiber, filled with vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, reduces the risk of all these different chronic diseases. But interestingly enough, if you were to actually look at the economic burden on the Canadian hospitalization system and healthcare, you can see that the insufficient intake of fruits and veggies by Canadians leads to an annual economic burden of $4.39 billion. Like, that's a lot of money, and these are the types of statistics that we share with our politicians to really kind of drive that message home that we need to focus on getting our population healthier. So how can dietitians support our clients to make fruits and veggies the easier choice? Something I'm sure we're all wondering. Well, one of the top strategies that I think we need to look at is that price barrier. So let's tackle that. We all see it in the news. You can see that's for the past few months, this is all we've been talking about. It's just about how expensive groceries are nowadays. But one thing I wanted to kind of point out, and I think it's kind of interesting to look at and also explain to consumers like why these prices, what's driving these prices up. And yes, it's the war in Ukraine, but when you look at it actually from an industry perspective, you can actually see, like in our sector, in the produce industry, these are some of the supply increases that you've seen throughout the year. So for example, the price of paper has gone up by 40%. In the greenhouse sector, they've missed so many materials that they're not able to operate for 8 months. Huge wood shortages. I don't know if anyone here has done any renovations throughout the summer, but the challenges with wood, pallet shortages really affect the industry. So all of these costs have led to a lot of these hikes in prices, and it's something that we've seen through not only our industry, but just the food industry in general. So where are we at now? Food inflation. Well, Stats Canada recently released some data, and it showed that consumers now are paying about 10% more for foods at stores compared to a year ago, and this is the largest increase since September 1981. The cost of fresh fruits went up 10% and 8% for fresh vegetables. And interestingly enough, you're starting to see a shift in kind of consumer patterns. We're seeing more people switching to less expensive grocery stores, like 46% of the population. I don't know if it's something you've considered even, but it's definitely something we've considered in our household is where do you shop to really save money? And I think, again, when we're talking about food inflation, we need to talk about, our most vulnerable population. And there was a recent, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but the recent household food security report that was put out by Dr. Tarasuk out in Toronto, and her team of food researchers showed that 1 in 6 households is food insecure. So it's really alarming. Like if you think about that in terms of like the number of people in our room, 1 in every 6, so it's almost like 1 in every row is food secure. So I think it's definitely something that we need to just remind ourselves on and be conscious of that. Hopefully there's there's good news though when it comes to food inflation. Sylvain Charlebois, food economist in Canada, believes that the food inflation has peaked, and we've seen the highest prices. So hopefully he's right in his estimation. So we'll see how that goes. So the question comes to how can we better support our clients in this area? And I think the notion is that, yes, I think we need to kind of be careful with how we message and how we frame fruits and vegetables with our clients. I think we can show them that fruits and vegetables can be affordable, and we need to show them this through a lot of the food skills that we already know that they may lack. So shopping the flyer, for example, and doing the math on that, meal planning, shopping in season. So a lot of food skills that many consumers lack. And I think there's real value in actually just crunching those numbers and putting a dollar value to these teachings. And this is a resource that I'm going to show you that you can use in practice. So what we've done here, this is like a real life example that we've done, is we've taken kind of a grocery list for fresh produce for one person for the week. And we've quantified it versus buying it on special versus buying it at regular price. And you can actually see here that the price difference is a weekly saving of $14 a week and an annual saving of $733 a year. And that's just for one person, and that's just for produce. So if you think about a family of four, like quantifying that by 4 times, I think showing these numbers, yeah, you say shop the flyer, but hey, this is like the actual amount of money that you can save when you shop the flyer really helps to drive that message home. So I think this is definitely a worthwhile resource, an activity to do with your clients. Another kind of, program that we do every week at Half Your Plate is we actually show what $20 can get you. So we go to because we're a national association, we go through different cities across Canada, and we look at different flyers in different cities, and we show Canadians, hey, like this is how much produce you can get for $20. And we take it a step further, and we actually show the amount of fruits and vegetables that you can get in sides and in snacks. Health Canada's asking everyone to fill half their plate with fruits and vegetables. Well, this is what it looks like. You're getting 17 sides of veggies and 12 snacks. And we also show you what you can do with these produce items in terms of recipes. So another strategy that I think is very important to talk about is providing food waste support. How many of us here talk to our clients about food waste? Okay, good. A couple of hands. Yeah, that's good. That's reassuring. So how much money do households lose each year due to avoidable food waste? Can anyone guess? $2,000?
Was it a percentage?
Or like how much money do households lose each year
500.
due to avoidable food waste? $500? 2,000? Okay, well this number was taken in 2017 when prices were a little bit lower, but they lose on average $1,300 per year. That was a number taken in 2017, so I'm sure in today's economy that would be a lot more, right? Interestingly enough, when you look at, what is the top commodity that's being wasted, it's fruits and vegetables. 45% of household food waste in Canada is fruits and veggies. And most of that is coming from leftovers that are just being tossed or by bulk buying and then the food just going bad. So how can we better support our clients in this area? Well, I think when it comes down to produce, there's a lot of education that we can do in this area. And I think it goes from selection to storing to meal planning. Like all of these are really great skills that you can learn, that you can pass on to your clients. And definitely for me, like as a previous retail dietitian, I had a great experience being able to shop with clients and actually showing them, oh, like you don't know how to pick a cantaloupe? This is what you look for. And actually showing them these skills is really helping. Telling them how to store it, like, for example, how many of us here store tomatoes in the fridge? It's okay, don't be shy, no judgment. Yeah, so like tomatoes are actually best stored on the countertop. It actually affects the flavor and the mealy texture of it. Apples, for example, too. How many of us are storing them on the countertop? So they're storing it on the countertop. You're actually, it's going bad 10 times faster than if it were stored in the fridge. So a lot of these, there's a lot of tips and tricks when it comes to produce of what you can do to reduce waste. And a lot of it is really education, and a lot of it is really food skills. So there's a bunch of knowledge, I think, to learn here. So I think we can do a lot, like in our profession, in terms of being creative when it comes down to waste. I think there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of hands-on support we can offer in the grocery store setting. I think it could be really interesting to do home visits or kitchen assessments, like, either in person or even virtually. Oh, like, why don't you show me, like, where are you storing your potatoes? Where are you storing this? Having almost like a food waste, like, assessment, I think would be really cool and really valuable. Cooking classes featuring that topic of wasting food would be really interesting too. I know we have a lot of dietitians here who are on social media. Social is a great channel to just, do up a quick reel of how you store your herbs, for example, can be really fun. So there's definitely lots of education that we can do here. So because we're nearing the end of the night, I thought I'd throw in a food waste game, keep everyone's attention. So play along with me. So how can you keep box lettuce fresh longer? I know this is a popular commodity. Everyone hates coming home to wilted lettuce, the slimy leaves, like nobody wants that. Well, how can you keep this fresh longer? Yeah, in the back. Paper towel, yes, excellent. That's perfect. That is a really good tip. So yes, by storing that paper towel in your lettuce, it's helping to allow that moisture to come up, and it's that moisture that really rots the leaves. So by adding that paper towel, you're drawing it in, and you're really helping to prolong those lettuce leaves. So well done. Also, another thing too is look at the best before dates often on these, because oftentimes you'll see different dates, and I try to choose the ones that are fresher. Another quiz. How can you extend the life of fresh, delicate herbs like parsley or cilantro? Nobody likes coming home and having their fresh herbs go bad a couple of days later. Yeah, Jen?
I put it in a glass of water, like flowers.
Perfect, yes, exactly. We got a bunch of pros in here today, eh? So yeah, just store them like you would flowers by just like cutting them up and then putting them in a little bit of water, putting them in the fridge, and then you can put a bag over top to keep the optimal humidity level. That's the best way. You'll notice like your fresh herbs that maybe went bad after 3 days is lasting you 2 weeks. So like really, like when I discovered this tip, I was like, like so good. How about this? How about if your carrots or celery are wilting? Is it time to toss? Yeah, go ahead.
Sometimes with my celery, I just cut it up and put it in a jar of water.
Yeah.
Put it in water and it gets crunchy again.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? Isn't science amazing when it does things like that? So yeah, just by putting it in water, you can really help revive it. And it makes sense because, these vegetables are, they have all of their capillaries that are looking for moisture. And sometimes when they're in the fridge, that moisture is taken out. So just by putting it in water, the same you can do with like lettuce too, that sometimes, not the baby lettuce, but like bigger leaves of lettuce that look like they're a little bit sad looking. If you plunge it in like ice cold water, it'll come back to life. It's really amazing. So what fruit or vegetable stores best after being well washed and dried? Usually washing a fruit or vegetable means you should be eating it soon, because it increases its perishability a bit. Which one actually will store best? Does anyone know? It's actually lettuce. Yeah, it's actually like a head of lettuce. So if you were to buy a head of lettuce at the grocery store, you wash and dry it and leave it either in a salad spinner, or if you put it in a Ziploc bag with some paper towels, moist paper towels, it'll last up to 2 weeks. So a really fun tip to share with your clients. Now corn, I think it's corn season in Ontario. I forgot to mention I'm from Ontario, but I think it's corn season here in BC as well. So what are like the best tips? How do you know if corn is good or not? Anyone do anything when you look at corn? Are you just kind of picking and throwing in your bag? What do people look for?
I open the top and
Yeah.
the kernels. I don't know if there's a better way.
Excuse me. Yeah, right on. So like what you're looking for, Desiree, is like tight kernels. That's a good sign. But also you want the outer husk to be a little bit on the greener side. And that silk, that's like that kind of like the kind of like hairy stuff, I guess you can say. That one needs to be moist, and it's a good sign that it's fresh. So we have actually a lot of these tips on our fact sheets, our fruit and veggie fact sheets. You may have picked some up at our table over there, our resource table with our half your plate resources. If you haven't seen them yet, feel free to check out our table. But we have all these fact sheets on how to properly select, how to properly store, what to do with all of these fruits and veggies, because again, these are a lot of tips and tricks that people just don't know about. Some other fun resources that we've developed this past year is a really fun storage guide showing you exactly where different fruits and vegetables should be stored at your home. This shelf life guide is really a fun one, and it actually came from a conversation that I had with a dietitian out in Winnipeg who came up to me and said, you know what you need to do? You need to make a guide that shows you like when the fruits and veggies are going to go bad, and then the ones that are going to last longer. So that's exactly what we did. So we have this guide over here that shows you, which produce is going to last you 2+ weeks, which ones you should eat in the next few days. And I think it lends itself as being a very good guide when meal planning with your clients as well. There's also a food waste guide over here. And the one that we most recently made is how to preserve your summer produce longer. We're kind of in the season now where people have so much produce in their gardens that they're not sure what to do with, or they're going to farmers markets and they're buying tomatoes in huge boxes and they're not knowing what to do with it. And also, this one is quick and easy. It doesn't involve canning, so if you're looking for something a little bit quicker, we have a whole guide on how to freeze your own vegetables and freeze your own fruit, which is really cool. So I encourage you to look at that as well. For people who prefer videos, we just started releasing these how-to videos, which have been a fun project on my end and quite new for me. So yeah, so I think, food waste is definitely something I think we've all learned today that is something that we need to be talking with our clients a little bit more. My third strategy that I wanted to kind of go over is really understanding that taste matters. When it comes down to consumer preferences, and I think Dr. Yann, I think you kind of touched upon this as well, taste is really king when it comes down to, what's going to drive a consumer to eat something again or to buy something again. It's not price, it's taste. So when it comes down to vegetables, oftentimes, I think, like you were saying, people don't tend to put the pleasure with vegetables, right? So I think we're kind of in a position here where we need to really just inspire trial and inspire like tastiness and flavorfulness when it comes to vegetables. And it doesn't have to be anything complicated. Even just, you may be dealing with a client who just boils their vegetables every single day. Just giving them that tip, why don't you try roasting it in the oven? can really make a big difference. So sample when possible, cooking classes, food demos, even if you can like send your client with a new fruit or vegetable to try, like after they come see you for a consult, can be something interesting to do as well. So we also have a guide over here on how to make your veggies taste even better. Lots of graphics to really get that point across. Lots of recipes on our website as well as how-to videos. And then our fruit and veggie fact sheets. So again, when it comes down to just to summarize today, the 3 key strategies, again, when it comes to fruits and vegetables, talk about price, really quantify the savings when it comes down to shopping the flyer or looking for specials or meal planning. Even costing out a recipe with them can really make a difference. Talk about waste. I think this is like a huge saving. Wasted food is wasted money, right? So if we talk a little bit more about how you can preserve your produce, you can really be making a big difference. And again, inspiring trial through taste. So at the end of the day, I think we do have a long way to go. You remember the stat, how many Canadians are not eating enough fruits and veggies? Yeah, 80%, 79%. Oh, you guys were listening. Good job. I think, if you look at those numbers and you look at kind of our goals to try to encourage all Canadians to fill half their plate with fruits and veggies, that we have a long way to go, right? But I think the way we should look at it is, even if we're just encouraging our clients to have 1 extra fruit or 1 extra vegetable per day, that will make a huge difference, I think, for the Canadian population and for their health. And it really is the right steps in the right direction. So I think in the positions that we're in, I met some really great dietitians in all different sectors today, whether it's in public health or in social media or in the community. We're all in a real position of influence. And I think we have really the capabilities, the knowledge, and the skill set to really shift the eating patterns of Canadians. I won't be spamming you with stuff. It's curated by me, where we share our new resources, our new events. Something that we want to plan to continue doing that kind of got held because of the pandemic is produce tours for dietitians. So we actually took dietitians to different member sites. So taking you to a greenhouse or taking you to a packing facility to kind of give you an idea of what happens behind the scenes. So you'll find out about these events through our newsletter. And also in 2024, we're actually going to be hosting, I don't know if anyone's attended the last one in the past, I think that was done in 2017 or 2019, where we came to Vancouver and we had an event specifically for dietitians, and it aligns with our annual trade show. It's the largest fruit and vegetable trade show in Canada, and you get an opportunity to meet all the people behind produce, sample like new products. Like the last one we had was in Montreal this year, and they had pink pineapple, which was really cool, and some really neat products. So we'll be back in 2024 to be offering this event for dietitians. So with that, I just wanted to thank you and welcome any questions if you have any.
A question about food waste in the like the fruits and vegetables waste in the grocery store.
Yeah.
Because I do see, like when I'm in there, I see them with like a bin and they're coming by and they're throwing out like tons of food at the grocery store level. Is that due to like delays in like shipping, or like is that gone up, or has that always been? Is it just me noticing it now?
Yeah, what's interesting is even when I worked in the grocery sector, I noticed there was actually some produce departments that had a composter as well. So I think we're starting to kind of see like a little bit of a shift in sustainability. We had, a couple of stores that had these composters that took all the rotten fruits and vegetables and gave that to neighboring farms to feed their pigs. So I think there's definitely talk of more sustainability when it comes down to produce. In the grocery section too, we talk to some retailers as well, and they don't want their produce to go bad, right? It's wasted money for the business too. So there's definitely initiatives to try and decrease that. Whether or not it's gone up or down, not in a position to say, but it's definitely an initiative that our industry is working on. Another one too that I think is worth mentioning is plastics. I think plastics and sustainability, it's something that our industry is really looking and investigating a little bit more, as well as even the little, those little PLU stickers that you'll see on fruits and veggies, trying to get that to be compostable. It's so complex. Like, I'm in some of these discussions talking about recyclability and compostability, and when you look at the different systems in Canada, every kind of province and every kind of city recycles and composts very differently. So it's quite a challenge, but there are going to be new environmental labeling laws that are going to be coming out eventually. And I think all the provinces and all the cities are going to have to come together to have a more standardized process for that.
I have a question. I think both speakers can pitch into this. So you said the number of people who shop online has gone up. Right? So I'm curious to know if there's opportunities for any digital nudging for these online food choices that can increase fruit and vegetable consumption. Are there any research that's available for these digital nudging online choices, or do we see opportunities for that?
Yeah, I can let you speak to that if you want to speak to nudging, but I think that with the digital atmosphere that we have today, I think definitely there's lots of nudging that can happen. I think, we were talking with some of our retailers too about, online shopping, and is that because there's a lot of impulse buying that happens in stores, and whether that's impacted sales. And they've actually mentioned that because of the digital atmosphere today and the types of things that you can do with pop-up ads or things like that, you can drive sales that way. So driving sales of healthier items would be, I think, a really great strategy and something we can definitely take advantage of. I don't know if you have any comments on that. Do you want the microphone?
I don't know if it's not really about online nudging, but it's definitely true that taste is the number one criterion of choice for many consumers. There's also convenience, something that we observe a lot with fruits and vegetables, where consumers don't find it convenient enough.
Yeah.
That's why you end up with atrocities like cut fruits in a plastic packaging, right? Why it would be easy to eat your apple, but no, the apple needs to be pre-cut and put in a plastic packaging and sold to consumers, right? So it's really hard to find the right way to sell fruits and vegetables that would overcome this belief by consumers that some fruits are less tasty and less convenient, and while protecting the environment at the same time. It's like very challenging issue.
Yeah, and I think part of, you said it exactly, like part of that challenge is everyone wants convenience, and when you look at where the sales are in the produce section and where the increases are, a lot of it is towards those convenience foods like chopped up carrots or chopped up broccoli. There's definitely, and salad kits, for example, there's definitely a drive that's coming from consumers